guest right here to my right is the author of Famous Men Who Never Lived, published by Tin House Books this year in March 2019. Her writing has appeared in the Chicago Tribune's Printers Row Journal, Pank, Salon, Tour.com, and other outlets. And her short stories have been honored by the Nelson Algren Literary Award and the Pushcart Prize. Kay earned an MFA from Southern Illinois University and has been a W.K. Rose Fellow. She teaches writing at Grove Street and lives in Providence. Hester Kaplan, who many of you may know, is the co-founder of Goat Hill for Writers. She teaches creative writing in several MFA programs and offers manuscript consultation and development, take note, and one-on-one teaching and coaching. She is the author of the story collections The Edge of Marriage, winner of the Flannery O'Connor Award for Short Fiction, and Unravished, and the novels The Tell and Kinship Theory. Her short fiction has been widely published and anthologized, including in the Best American Short Stories. She is an NEA recipient, winner of the McGinnis-Ritchie Award for Nonfiction, the Salamander Fiction Contest, a fellowship from RISCA, among other awards. And then we have Janet Pocorobba, who teaches nonfiction and is an associate director of the Leslie Lowe Residency MFA in Creative Writing. She received her MFA from Leslie in June 2006. A former writer and contributing editor at Metropolis magazine in Tokyo, her memoirs, essays, and reviews have appeared in The Rumpus, Harvard Review, The Writer, Kyoto Journal, and elsewhere. Her memoir, The Fourth String, a memoir of Sensei and Me, was published by Stonebridge Press in March 2019. She lives in Calais, okay. Vermont, where she is writing a book about women, her local co-op, and community. So let's welcome them here, and then I'll ask them a few questions. Thank you for being here. All right. So, as you all know, National Novel Writing Month is a generative tool, right? A lot of writers have been finding they turn off their inner editors during NaNoWriMo to get that word count out and focus on those goals. So do you have any revision advice specifically for writers who have that first draft in hand? Where would you start after all that generative force in revising the first draft? What's your first step or strategy? It's a big question.
That's a big question. Say like have a beer, walk around Netflix for like a month. I mean, just to kind of, I think when it is so generative, and if you are putting out that many words, to just be mindful too of your creative, just kind of refill the well a little bit. Like I wouldn't rush to look at it. Let it kind of cool off a little bit and think about something else, or go skiing or something, and then come back. And then, like we said, there's a lot of aspects to how you look at it then. But I think that's important when you've been so inside it too. If you've generated 50,000 words per month. I didn't do NaNoWriMo, but for the first time in my writing life, I created a writing sprint, an 8-week sprint, and I did 69,000 words. I got a full draft down. So I'm kind of in the same boat as you guys. Like I now have this full draft, and it's like, what next?
So when did you finish that, Janet?
So I finished that mid-November. 12th.
And you've been watching Netflix.
Really, it's funny because I don't have a television, so I'd watch anything like on my computer. And I live in a little cabin in Vermont, like very in the woods. And I've been wanting to watch everything, anything. I just had this appetite for movies, and I'm just finding myself craving other stuff and other media. So I told myself I'd give myself a month to do nothing and not even think about it, don't even go near the topic. And then I'm gonna just sit all in one sitting and take it in. And at that point, that first read through, I think I'm really just gonna ask myself, did I feel anything? Is it a thing, right? It's like, did it work? I had some ideas when I was writing, but really, like, is there even a story there, and is it even interesting? Because if it isn't, and if I don't feel connected, or if it's not generating anything, I'm going to have to either do a lot of work or be like, chuck it out.
What's 8 weeks of your life, after all?
What?
What's 8 weeks?
What's 8 weeks? Right. Well, my first book took a lot longer than 8 weeks, so.
But I think this idea of stepping away from it for a while is a really excellent idea. Because what it also allows you to do is when you come back and you're going to read those 89,000 words or whatever it is, you're reading not as the writer, but you're reading as the reader. Very soon you're gonna have to turn back into the writer.
Yep.
But it allows you to approach it from a different angle. And I think that revision to me is everything. The first draft is this. So it's critical that you keep an open mind. And I think that month away or however long you take away allows you to let go of some of those ideas that the book is about this and it's gonna do this and it's gonna do this. And you come back to it and you see something different and you hear something different and you have to be open to listening to that. And I'll just tell a really quick story that I happen to teach where Janet is also the associate director. And I had a student in her first semester when we were workshopping a story of hers, and it was about a woman who had broken up with her boyfriend in a bad way, and found a dog by the side of the road, took it to the pound, and there she became friends with the woman who ran the pound. There was a lot going on, and in discussion of the story, everybody in the room, there were probably 15 people, said, I'm picking up that there's an attraction between these two women. And the writer said, absolutely not. And everyone said, well, you may not think that, but we're picking that up. So that was in her first semester. Her fourth semester, she brings back the story, right? It's now gone through many, many revisions. It's a whole new group of people. And they say to her, is something going on? Because we're hearing, we're feeling this. And she said, absolutely not. So it was one of these things where it was very instructive to me that it was something that she didn't want to see in her story, but it was clearly there. And, sometimes you just have to go with what it's telling you, not what you intended it to do.
There's so many ways to revise though, and I don't think it can be done by majority rule, like maybe the feedback or the takeaway from that is like, if you don't want this to be a love affair, one of these characters has to be completely different from how they are in this draft. You don't have to lean into the love affair, though I would, I'm all about that. But yeah, like if one, if everyone's telling you something, it doesn't mean you have to do the directive thing of.
No, but I think it means that you have to
acknowledge this.
You have to acknowledge
away from it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And acknowledge what you as the writer are feeling, because it's to me it's unlikely that she didn't also feel it, but just didn't want that. That
Well, it
wasn't
sounds
the
like
direction.
maybe some therapy. I don't know.
We offer that too.
I like what Janet said about, and I completely agree about taking a break away and indulging in some Netflix. But I like when you do come back and you're able to read your work again as a reader. I think we think of revision as a process of fixing things that are wrong with the draft, and I liked what Janet said about, does this speak to you? What's resonating? What's good about it? Like, what parts of this are the best? What parts of it? At what point are you moving yourself and you're like, ooh, I got chills, this is so good. Who wrote this? Oh, it was me. Looking for those things. If there's none of them in the entire draft, that's a problem. But when you find those moments, figuring out how you can get to them faster or bring out more of them.
And I think the word revision is almost the wrong word.
Yeah.
And some people call it drafting. Most people call it revision. And to me, it's not revision. It's writing. Right? It's not. Revision suggests, as you said, that you're just sort of fixing and you're polishing the edges and sort of shaping it.
Taking out the old thesaurus, adding some commas.
Yes,
No.
but it's a very different process.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's most of it. I like when you said that, getting it down, you have to get it down, but that's like this. Like, I know I'm gonna probably spend up to a year now making it a full, complete college draft. But to your point, Kay, like my first time with the first book, that book, I spent so much time polishing stuff without it really reaching me, And it's like, I got attached to sentences, I got attached to the way it got put down at a certain point in my experience, and then it was really hard to change it. I mean, a woman maybe. But, so my approach now is actually gonna be completely opposite, where I'm probably gonna have to squint a lot when I read this draft, because there's gonna be like typos and, you know, crappy sentences, but I'm gonna try to go from that layer that's, you know, intuitive and what's in there for me, and then work my way up, and then when I have the structure and it's shaped and it's ready to go polish. Because I think it's not rare for us to sometimes get into polishing. I mean, who doesn't like polishing sentences? I mean, this is totally fun, but the other thing I'll say is that I think sometimes I would go into writing when I should have probably been thinking. Like, I think there's a lot of writing that happens off the page, away from the desk, away from any of it. And it's still writing, right? Where you're thinking it out, you're going for a walk, you're swimming, you're really doing all that plotting and voice, and you're kind of creating everything here. But I would feel like, no, if I didn't, you know, if I'm not at my desk, it's not writing. And I'd be writing stuff and I'd be like, what am I saying? Like, I don't even know. So that's not very, you know, economical. It's gotta, you know, go. So to not be afraid to not write. Just be like, okay, now I'm gonna just sit with this for a few months, reread it, see what it is, and then when I know what it is, then I'm really ready to go in and take the knife.
I think also there's and I'd be interested to hear what people say about this. I mean, everybody approaches this differently, in that some people don't like to talk about what they're working on at all, ever, until they're absolutely ready. And I think there is a sort of stage in revision where you say, I am now ready to talk out some of these problems to people. And just the act of articulating what it is you're trying to say, and you can't quite get there on the page, the act of doing that with somebody else is really, can be, you know, enormously generative. And it also means that you've now decided that this is an outward-facing piece as well as an inward-facing piece, and it's. I think that's a big step when you make that decision.
To that end, are there any specific resources or tools when you are at that, when you feel ready to bring it before other people's eyes, either locally or online, or have any of you ever worked with an editor? Specifically, are there any specific tangible things people can do to reach out and find that reader or that pair of eyes here in correction?
Well, it's you know, don't trust anybody in your family. First advice that will not be useful to you. You need to find someone who you trust, and that person I don't think necessarily needs to be a writer. They need to be a reader, and they need to be willing not to pull any punches with you. And that, you know, that is not always easy to find. You know, it can take a lot of sort of false starts. But it is, you know, it is this huge sort of psychological leap to give your work to somebody else. I mean, in terms of developmental editing, you know, I think of that as sort of much further down the line. And, you know, probably many of you are in writing groups. Some of you are in writing groups.
Should I plug the meetup writing group? We have, I don't know if you're familiar with the app Meetup, but there is a writing meetup called the Providence Writers. I'm technically one of the co-organizers. We meet here twice a month, once for our write-ins where we just kind of sit and write together, and once to workshop pieces. And so, yeah, I can answer questions about that, but we're on Meetup, and yeah, you guys can kind of sit, yeah.
Oh, you're on Meetup, the app?
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Providence Writers, our logo is like a yellow thing, like kind of a abstract, do it, keep going sideways. But yeah, Providence Writers, you'll find it. Matt, who is the founder, usually asks people to like send a short, you know, example of their writing, and that's not to say like whether it's good or not, just to see that you actually actively write things, and that can be
To make sure you're not a cop.
yeah, yeah, basically, yeah. So yeah, that's us.
So plugging into local writing groups and classes to
And classes,
when you're ready.
yeah.
And I think, I don't know if you do that when you do development editing, but when I work with somebody, I think when you can start to, maybe you're not ready to show the manuscript yet, but you're starting to articulate what it's about. Because I think it's hard to know, like, what is the story? Like, we're always trying to find out, like, what is the story about? And it can take a while to drill down in several drafts and all of that. So, but I think talking that out with somebody, I just find that it's a very iterative thing where you talk it out, then you go write some more, and then you might have to, it's that consciousness, right? You're bringing it into consciousness. Okay, this is about this, and then you look at it differently, and then you kind of drill down, and then you change again. But I think there's so much that's inchoate. You're just kind of writing it, and then you're like, you do have to come out of that and be like, okay, this is about X, because that is then going to be important for a query, a proposal, right? Where you have to learn how to look at it a little bit like that and say, this is a story about X.
You're gonna have to talk about your manuscript over and over and over again in different contexts. So
Right.
yeah, it's a good practice, I think, even really early in the process.
It's like the product really is the process too. Like, I like bringing it all together.
And I think that this idea of knowing what your piece, your manuscript is about, is something that may happen way. I mean, you may have gone, 5 or 6 drafts and still not really know what this thing's about. And that may be the very, very last thing that sort of clicks for you.
Well, the answer can change, or there can be a big gap
Yes.
between
Right,
what you
right.
think the book is about and what it actually seems to be about to readers that are not you. And that's the reason I'm a trusted reader, I suppose, when you say, I've had, speaking of like having people, when you are further along in the process than what we're currently talking about, when you are writing your query letter, you think your book is ready to submit, you're writing a query letter, and you ask a friend to just read your query letter, they could be like, this is a great query letter, it makes me want to read your book, but if they haven't read your book, they don't know if it's a good query letter for your book, actually. Because maybe you're describing like a great book that's not your book. Maybe,
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's so interesting. Like, I think talking about it, or talking about what you think your book is about early in the process is really healthy, but also being willing to be like, hey, I think it's actually about the gay love affair between this woman and this woman at the shelter, like, okay, well, I need to change something. I need to either lean into that or move away from it, but if that's what the readers are getting, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's a lot of stepping away and getting perspective from either yourself having time away or through others.
Can I ask a question? So like one trusted reader, so you've written the whole draft and then you took some time away and then maybe you reread it and worked on some things by yourself, but now you're ready to turn to other folks, like you said. Do you want to go to a writing group and get a number of people's opinions, or do you want one trusted reader? Like, what do you want to do?
That's a question.
Yeah, I have just like a few readers. I know. I've never been able to function well in writing groups. I don't know why. I like to just be very solitary until I'm ready to show it, and then I have some people who are writers, some who are just readers, and I like to get their take.
I usually have one that I will work with for a while and then move on to sort of like the last person. So one at a time. I mean, I think I was in a writing group for 15 years, and it was invaluable. I think it's very hard to bring a long piece to a writing group, and because you run the risk of being derailed, right? Because they're only reading, let's say, the first 35 pages, and then you haven't talked about the mother, and you haven't talked about this, and you haven't talked about that, and you just want to keep saying, but it's coming, it's coming.
Yeah.
So it's, there's a way in which you need to sort of protect the whole piece that makes it hard to bring it to a writing group. But, I think everybody finds their sort of their different comfort level. I mean, do you have one?
I've used
Multiple.
writing group mostly for a generation, it's like gonna be embarrassing if you tell people you'll have a chapter for them and you don't, you look like a fool. So that's to me like the reason to have a writing
That's
group.
one of the best
Yeah,
reasons.
and for like bitching with them, about how hard it is to be a writer. But in terms of if I were in your shoes and I'd just written a novel during November and I had 50,000 words, I don't know that I would really even want 7 different people's opinions on that. Even if all 7 of them are like, I will drop everything and read your novel draft, I want to figure out like who I trust as a reader.
But if you're the kind of person who can take those 7 different opinions. I mean, someone told me, you know, way back when, said, the thing about getting 7 different opinions, or hearing 7 different takes, is that your work is to hear that 8th voice. And that was really instructive for me.
That's the
because
8th voice, I'm missing the point of the story, that's the 8th voice.
that's you, that's you.
Okay.
You have to
You
find
can't be
it.
drowned out, you mean, by the 7.
Well,
That's
that
the
if you're looking at these 7 people and you're hoping that in those seven responses is the answer to fixing your book, it's not gonna be there, you've got to.
Is there sometimes a pattern though, like if you go to 7 people and
Everyone's like the beginning is boring.
then there's certain things they say and you go, okay, 7 people have said, it can be insightful and informative as a tool to see patterns, because obviously everyone's got their own perspective, but you start to see common things happening. And you're going, let me just check myself on that. Was that intentional, or do I care? I mean, you don't even have to listen to them to your point of the 8th voice, but should I care? Should I re-examine?
Right, if everyone in the room is saying that your character is coming off as really, really obnoxious, and you think that your character is sweet and lovely, then there's a dissonance that you may wanna check to.
Have you ever been in a writing group though, or a writing workshop where everyone else in the class is like, cut the mother, she's awful, and you in your head are like, but the mother, you're not the writer in this scenario, right? But you're like, the mother's the best part of the story, right? Like, and maybe you're wrong, and maybe the author ought to listen to the 7 people that say the mother's awful, but I don't think you're ever gonna figure it out. Just, like, you have to tell the story of your heart, even if it's about a mother that no one loves. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. It's complicated, clearly.
Well, I think what you just said too about listening, telling the story that's in your heart to tell, like, and that, it's hard to hear that sometimes, right? Because there can be all these voices and workshops and people kind of chiming in on it, and I find it hard to just kind of stay with that and just keep true to that vision. And then you hear everything and you make your adjustments, but you have to keep going back to that 8th voice, right? And just being like, and check in, is that what I wanted, or is that what I'm trying to do? And
There's always those essays on LitHub that are like, here's all the terrible reviews of, Pride and Prejudice, from all the people that thought it really sucked, like,
right, all rejection.
here's this person that, was never recognized in her lifetime, but everyone told her she was awful, and then after her death we realized she's a genius,
Yeah.
But there's a fine line between being like, not listening to anyone, that's bad, so.
Right.
What do you do? The difference between if the mother, the people were saying, and you're trusting them, cut the mother, they're saying cut the character out. If you're responding that she's interesting, there's something wrong with the example, because she's annoying to 7 people.
Mhm.
Do they really mean cut her out because, there's annoying, protagonists? So you get what I'm saying? It's like, is that the right read? Maybe she's annoying, man. That's your, like you're going, no, that's your character. Don't cut her, man. No, that's
Right.
And they're all responding. The 7 are responding. I'd be like, motherfucker, I got a great character. Their personality,
She's
page
staying
35.
around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of critique, I don't find so helpful, because it's like, you're just saying, okay, cut the character, but like, you're not saying what the character is doing to you, you're not giving the writer the information where they might say, oh, it's annoying you, that's what I wanted, maybe I have to do a little tweak so it's clearer, but like, I think being so directive, even when I'm working with people, like, I don't just kind of make declaratives like, do this, do that, it's like, what is this doing, let's explore this a little bit, and this is how it's coming off, and,
I think that you'll discover also that you stick to your guns more than you think you might. And that you may hear that 7 people find this mother really obnoxious, but you hear it, but you know that you said that
They
there's
didn't have a
something, there's
narcissistic
something
parent.
there.
And maybe it needs to be a completely different story that's really about the mother, or maybe that the feedback cut the mother tells you, okay, I'm digging into the mother.
Well, they're paying attention to the mother.
Yeah.
Right, some things there.
Jody, can I add something?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and this has probably changed for you guys like throughout your careers, but like when either you or like one of your readers feels like they've identified something that is a hard problem in your work, like you see it and you're like, shit, are like, okay, maybe I should scrap this, or I have to start hiking up this really tall mountain of work that it takes to fix it. I think that can be like just a big psychological barrier of like deciding how to make that choice and like deciding how to proceed on just like staying confident amidst the like great unknown of charging ahead. And I wonder like how you guys have grappled with that in your work.
How to deal with criticism that you agree with, but it's really big.
Or your own voice that's like, this is a huge problem. Like, what do I do? Or someone else being like, that's a huge problem. And you're like, okay, you're right. What do I do? Do you like when to decide to scrap it, when to decide to persist, and what tools help you make those decisions?
You heard us all.
I just remember like too, like I was kind of in a not changing mode. I was kind of sticking by my guns with this draft, and it wasn't there yet, and it wasn't ready. And I remember having, it was like Howard Norman. He was just like, we're having a discussion about it, and he's like, it is not there.
Mm-hmm.
And just hearing that, and then I realized it was about I didn't want to do the work. I was like so humiliated. I just felt so,
That's the key, yeah.
Childish. But I was like, no, I am really trying to get away from a big mountain of work. A lot of stuff that I don't really know how to do. And he was just like, do you want to do it or not? and he was so serious. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. This is something I have to commit to, or get out of the game. And it was just like a big growing up moment. And then that was when I really started to take it apart and really look and what is it? And it was kind of brutal.
Yeah, well, I think if it's gonna be good, it's gonna be brutal. I mean, I think that's, maybe there are people in this room who, sit down and write the perfect thing, and it takes one little fiddling around, but I think for most of us, it is really brutal. And, I've written lots of stories in my life, and I just finished one last week, and I gave it to the reader, and the reader just said, nope. Every one of your characters is a caricature. I don't like this person. And that it hurts, but I also knew it was true, right? And you sort of have to believe in the value of your work. And a story. I'll talk about a story instead of a novel, just because it's shorter. It may go through 15 different iterations before it finds its home. And I mean home in your psyche, on the page.
Now let's say you've got your manuscript in hand and you've drafted it to the point where you're satisfied with it. What's the next step? I've been told that perhaps you might want to seek out a professional editor to have that done, or what's the next step looks like?
So in this scenario, have you had anyone read it? You've decided it's as good as you can make it.
Let's say yes. I've had my my trusted friends and comrades read it. They generally like it, and I say, okay, I want to try to get this published now. What do I do?
Well, can I just piggyback on a question? So
Yes.
you got the response from your trusted friends and comrades. Did you then go back and do the work that they were asking for?
Let's assume yes. Why now? That's my question. Because the really sad thing, my experience of publishing anyway, is that it's extremely, excruciatingly slow.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I see folks trying to decide whether they want to go the traditional publishing route or whether they want to do something indie or self-publish. And a lot of times, if you have this sense of a rush, in some sense, then you're going to be going the non-traditional route. But I would sort of question my own intentions for the book at that point if you feel a rush. Is it because you want your dying grandmother to be able to read it before she passes from this earth? Or do you have time for what's going to be a stop and start process? If you are going the traditional route, you would be at that point looking for an agent, and I don't think you need to. If you think it's good and your friends think it's good, I don't think you need to hire an editor at that point. Maybe if you try submitting it to a lot of places and no one else who isn't your friend thinks it's good, then you're going to want to look for an editor. But I don't think that the editor is a necessary step before you seek publication if you've made it as good as you can.
And in this hypothetical, have you published something else before? Is this-
No, let's say no.
Because there's a way you can sort of test the waters a little bit, which is to, in this hypothetical piece, is this a novel? Is this a 15 pages or is this 300 pages?
Let's say novel, let's say big.
I mean, you know, you could try to excerpt part of it and see if you could publish that as a story. I mean, you wanna, the thing about an agent and a publisher is you know, you really get one shot at this person. So you wanna make sure that this is really where it needs to be before you go out there.
So it seems like you're almost advising getting smaller things out first before jumping right in with a large project, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're gonna find one answer here to this question. You know, I can speak really to the sort of short story market, and as well as the novel market, but certainly in terms of short stories, you want to build up a publishing record. And the publishing record is not only to sort of place you in a certain level, right? It's sort of like, you know, the blurbs on the back of a book. They're really for booksellers. This is the sort of conventional wisdom. They're for booksellers that says, you know, if it's been blurbed by Don DeLillo or Richard Ford, then we understand that it's sort of, you know, virile literary fiction, right? It places it in a certain niche. And I think publishing short stories is the kind of same way. It depends on where these stories are published, you know, some of it. I mean, you could try a developmental editor. You're gonna spend some money. And you may find that, you know, you don't really need what you're paying for.
What's a developmental editor, sorry?
So a developmental editor would be, I mean, what I consider a developmental editor, and Janet does this work as well, is to take a novel or a piece where the author has kind of gotten it to as far as they can get, but there are areas that really need to be developed or taken down, or, you know, it's the stage before the actual word-by-word stage.
Developmental as opposed to copy editor. Copy editor is like, oh, you have a
missed
lot
the
of
comma.
problems with your commas. Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
I have a question. My question is, how did you as authors, get into a mindset regarding selling your manuscript? Because, you know, we're all into the arts and humanities, and we're not into sales. And if we were into sales, we'd be selling and
Not
making a
in
lot of
this
money.
room.
So, you know, but publishing is a business. You have to sort of sell your work to agents and to publishers and market it. And so I'm not talking about like how to write a query letter or anything, but how did you as authors get your mind into, I need to sell this, and what do you have to do to get yourself into that mindset?
What a great question.
Yeah, and it is a different mindset.
Never
Yeah,
thought
it's
of
hard.
it.
That's why I'm asking. Yeah.
You've stumped us.
Yeah.
You've stumped us. I mean, I think the reality is, and it's getting more so these days, that if you go with a big publisher, you know, a commercial publisher, you have giant advances up here, and you have tiny, tiny little advances here, if no advance at all. And this middle has completely dropped out. That's my understanding of what's going on now. So, I mean, you approach it with this idea that, as you said, this is not gonna make you money. That in fact, the publishing model that kind of seems to work best these days is smaller presses or independent presses where your advance might be $1,000 rather than $100,000. And so that you're not owing the publisher that kind of advance. You're not, you know, a piece of literary fiction, unless it's, you know, a phenom, is not going to earn back $100,000. It just doesn't happen like that.
What's a phenom?
Phenom.
Phenom.
Yeah.
Like,
Phenomenal.
One in a million.
I think that in terms, this is not exactly what you're asking, but if you have a published book and you're thinking about what you can do to get into selling mode to sell your book that's out, you do the things that are fun for you and the things that you play to your strengths. You could find a list of all the things that you might do. You can, try to become popular on Twitter, or you can do deals on BookBub, or you can, but you can do lots of events, or you can do lots of podcasts, or you could, there's a billion things that you could potentially do, but you're going to be most successful at the things that you're into. And everything else is going to come off as kind of half-assed or inept, I think. If you're not playing, if you hate talking to people in real life, then you can book, even if you booked a bunch of book dates, like you'd just come off as weird and no one would buy your book and you'd look like you were putting it in. So, and I think that the same could be said of even a person with a manuscript who's trying to get into the mindset of selling it to an agent. It's like, you clearly, if we just did this for our own fulfillment, then we wouldn't need to have it published, right? You would write it and you would have fun writing it, and then you'd feel good about yourself and you'd feel accomplished, and you wouldn't bother sending it to an agent. But you think that this is something that other people would enjoy and that other people should read, and you are speaking to the kind of reader that you are yourself. And a lot of that, I think, is what you're trying to tap into when you're looking for an agent. Like what is it is two different skill sets, of course. Writing and selling are two different skill sets, but you can carry your passion for your topic, your subject matter, your approach through in your efforts to get other people interested, I hope. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I like what you're saying too, because I think there can be this kind of, I know there's some MFA programs where they don't talk about publishing. It's like it's a dirty word, and there can be this oh, you're selling out if you're not just pure about your work, or you don't want to think about selling, And I used to kind of think like that, and it was kind of innocent or something. But I think if you really do want to be a professional, you have to kind of toughen up and be like, well, where am I in this? And there are things that you can do, like you said, what's it tapping into? You can go on Amazon and look at books that are like yours, and look at who reviews it, how do they talk about it, make your own synopsis. You kind of have to have that outer shell that's a little bit savvy, which sounds kind of gross in a way, but inside is that passion and that pure you that's creating the work. Now it's not like, I want to spend every day reading Publishers Weekly, but I probably want to do that a little bit, just kind of know what's happening in the publishing marketplace. Just like you said, that was a big piece of information. If you're trying to go for that and it doesn't exist, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. So just to kind of and go to events and talk to agents without wanting anything from them. In editors, just get to know people, form relationships, and just start to find out what is this world I want? Where do I want to be in this world? And so you're starting to think of yourself in a different way and see it from their side, because you kind of have to.
Inform yourself so you don't come in looking like you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. Yes.
Or you don't know the conventions of the genre, because that's very important. That's why you don't put your query letter in Comic Sans, because it's just not what everyone else is doing. You'll stand out in a bad way. So become aware of what other people are doing and try to do that. But then also, I think it can be helpful to develop a persona that's not you, that's your author persona, so that you don't feel this is this other person that, imagine a cool person that's trying to sell their wonderful first book. How do they, and it's not you. Because I think we're critical of ourselves because we're us, because we're awkward about being ourselves. But if you could imagine what's the perfect person who has a great novel and wants to sell it, how do they act in the world?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and this idea of professionalism. I mean, that you treat it as though this is absolutely serious to you, and this is your work. You wouldn't go into your job sort of half-assed and not having done your homework and feeling sort of shitty about yourself. So, I mean, as Kay said, these are often sort of I think contrary forces for people who write, because people who write are also people who find some bizarre solace, don't ask me why, in spending lots of time and mental space doing this. And then, in order to make this happen, you have to be the absolute opposite of that. You have to sell yourself, you have to be a personality.
So knowing you're not the only person that finds it excruciating.
Yes, almost everybody finds it pretty excruciating.
What you're talking about is branding and how you position yourself in the marketplace I should be in? What are other people I'm competing with doing? How do I what do I wanna take that they're doing that's working, and how do I wanna differentiate myself?
And how can I bring what is actually authentic to
And
me
how
into
might
it?
be
Right.
within
Yes.
this, and what are those reasons? Like why, what's the proof behind me being this versus that? That's actually strategic, and branding that we do, the world I work in, we do it for companies, we do it for people. Like that's what you need to be able to do for yourself when you wanna be in a competitive market space, which if you're deciding to sell yourself and you want people to be attracted to you, you've gotta be able to do that. Or have someone guide you, or understand that's what's needed.
But I think it's also important to recognize that this is not the model for everybody. I mean, a lot of people, write for very, very different reasons and are not, not out there to necessarily publish, and to, do book tours and all that kind of stuff, that it has, it has other value to them. And, for so many of us, I think, the book is the coin of the realm.
Wasn't that a complete validation of who
Yes,
you
absolutely.
There's so much
Absolutely.
ego in it, and
Yeah.
as someone who's traditionally published, but with a small press, I still am like, what if no one would ever read my book, would I still do it? And it's like a sobering answer, it is probably about validation, and, yeah.
We have Diana and then Jane.
Right. So I don't want to be this person, but I have a comment and a question. Yeah, but like circling back to the receiving critique at workshop thing, the best piece of advice I ever got on that was that readers can tell you where the problem is, but they're probably going to misdiagnose what you should do about it. So, with the mother example, maybe there's something about the way the mother's introduced that's not having the right effect. But anyway, sorry, I just wanted to throw that one out there. And so I guess so I've never written a book-like thing, but I presume that if I ever do, the first one I write is going to end up being published as like a short fragment of itself. I'm assuming the first one is just going to be. So how do you kind of, when you're thinking about building up that publishing record, or about turning these longer pieces into excerpts or shorter stories, I don't know if any of you have thoughts on that, or.
Well, I mean, just very specifically to yours, I think writing a short story and writing a novel are two completely different things. So even though I said, for your hypothetical that you might want to sort of test the waters with it, be cognizant that they are very different. They're very different skills.
Even an essay and a memoir.
Yeah.
And I haven't published tons of short stuff. I'm starting to do that more now, but I was just obsessed with this book. It wouldn't let me go, so it was just like I was just going for that, and I was just putting everything into that. But I think, to your point, they're different genres, so you have to kind of then really gear into a kind of a different headspace, compression, and you're kind of putting things. How do you put a big story into a small container? I mean, that's a whole art in itself. So just kind of figuring that out, which is going to take you away from the book project, and so that's.
A lot of people write short stuff first, and it's easier for, let's say your readers too, your friends and family who are reading the first work that you're willing to share with other people. It's easier to critique a short story than a novel. It's easier to critique an essay than it is to critique a memoir. If the first thing you ever wrote was long, I don't know what you'd do actually. But has anyone who's ever been in a workshop where you were asked to workshop the first chapter of a novel can tell you it's not satisfying necessarily to read a piece of something long without the context. So it does, I agree, it seems like two different things. But, I wonder maybe if you had a draft of something long, maybe consider writing something short and trying to build a publishing record with that, or turning back to your long piece and seeing what else.
Right, and excerpting, there's excerptable scenes and stuff that you can kind of build into a full story or standalone.
James, did you?
Yeah, this touches on a few things that you've all talked about. I read your book, I got it as soon as it came out at Scott's.
Yeah, I remember talking to you at Roofback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask this question, if it doesn't fit in, the question is, could each of you, because where you are now, could you describe, if I asked you, I'm saying, okay, so I got things to do, what's your book about? Can the.
Is this a yes or no question?
Can you do, yeah, I love that, very well played. So if you're pitching it, and you had it, since you've told me that the novels or the stories will change until you finally get to, you've published, so I read your book, I'm familiar, I saw your 3 books. If I asked you, what's your book about? Because I think it would be valuable to hear your voice when we all of you finally get there, which will help that last question, which is about addressing how you would actually talk about your ego, your book, and why it should be there. Is that unfair to ask a little short?
We're used to this.
Yeah.
We're used to this shit, James.
Is that-
And there's
is
so
that-
many, I was telling somebody else earlier, like there's lots of answers to this question depending on who you're talking to and how long they
Exactly,
want.
who
Do
you're- right,
you want
who you're
like
talking to.
what my book is about in 3 adjectives? Do you want what my book is about in a page? Like, do you want what my book is about so you can hire me as a tenured track professor? Or do you want what my book is about so that you can figure out whether to give it to your stepdaughter for Christmas?
The stepdaughter Christmas version.
Yeah, but I think that all of us, the answer is yes. Yes, we can do this, probably, right? Like, with, no?
Yeah, I think my book is about a young woman who learns she doesn't have to be perfect to be loved.
See, something like that.
I mean, that's
yeah,
like the
concept.
core,
Like,
like,
that's-
but, you know, this is
that's
Japan, this is like music, I mean, there's so much, you know, but at the core, that's what she learns.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, and that's in the context of what this gathering is about, right? It's for us people to figure out how we do this. So
And that's a premise probably, right, for a story, so you can see like how specific that is, and it took a while to get there, to really realize that's what it was about.
So you have to edit all of that down to that. Those are the words you're gonna say right there. And so I was going,
Right,
what do you mean about, you know, if they go like that, you know you're done. If
Right.
you say that and they go, huh?
yeah,
No.
and you notice too, like, I talked about my character. So I used to think of that book as like, it was about everybody else in the book or something, you know, and the character and the teacher and the culture. So to just really claim the story, like, okay, this is, you know, it's a memoir, so that it was true, so that the young woman is me, or is the narrator. But, yeah, to be able to really nail that down is tough.
Jay Hester.
Well, I'm gonna sort of take the negative track on that and say that I've been working on a nonfiction book for probably a year and a half now, maybe more. I can't tell you what it's about because I haven't written it yet. I mean, I'm not there yet. I am writing the book, and in the process of writing the book, I hope to discover what it's about. And once I discover what it's about, then I will be able to sort of go back and, you know, focus and put it on the right track.
But with your published books, can you do that?
It's very hard with stories.
Yeah.
Really hard. And the novels are, no. I
It
can't.
absolutely
I
makes sense to
can't.
me. You
It's-
wouldn't be able to do that for your work in progress yet. But,
Yeah, yeah. No, no, and you know, for me, this is a real struggle. So I mean, I like this question. I find it very provocative. But this is I find this a very hard thing to do.
So to address that, is that where the third, like someone we're assuming we have people that you trust to read, okay? They're not gonna, they're good, not projecting everything's happening to them on there. They can read. Is that where somebody could help you with that? Where we have this great piece, it's a good piece, you can tell because you work on it.
Yeah.
I can't quite nail it, and they go, and a tear, you know, they start crying. They're like, well, this is, you go, what's going on there? You go, well, this is what's happening. Do you see the dynamic? Is that what happens?
Well, so I was working with a writer, a very accomplished writer. He's published lots and lots, and he was struggling with this essay that he was probably working on for several years. It was probably 50 pages or so. And he got it accepted, and the editor had, for a good publication, the editor had some questions, and so I was working on it with him, and he said to me, how is it that I got to this point and I still don't know what this piece is about? And, you know, it was like 1 inch from the finish line, and he still didn't know what this piece was about. And, you know, he just had to push and push and push and push. And I had to say, well, maybe it's about this, maybe it's about that. You know, it was sort of it was a conversation. But that sort of, what is the essence of this piece about, is the most elusive thing, I think. And that's so counterintuitive, right? I mean, that's my process in this. It may be different for you guys and everybody in this room.
You have to be able to say something, but maybe it's not the right thing.
Yes, you have to be able to say
We
something.
do, I think,
right.
even published authors have this desire to have someone else smart tell them what they think the book is about, and that too is probably tied up in ego. But I remember I had to write a query letter to get an agent, and then after I had an agent, my agent had to write a pitch letter to get a publisher interested. And the pitch letter utilized some elements of the query letter that I had sent her, but also my agent had read the book and had figured out what she thought it was about, and she wrote a version, right? And then the publisher ultimately wrote jacket copy to get people to buy the book. And I thought, this is gonna be so great, the publisher has a professional marketing person who's gonna read my book and they'll be smart and they'll know what it's about and they'll know how to sell it and they'll write this jacket copy. And the jacket copy is exactly like my editor's pitch letter. I mean, my agent's pitch letter, yeah. So, I mean, I was hoping to get yet another person to tell me what my book was about, and I was thwarted in that. But, that's why that's why authors read reviews. You want somebody else to tell you, and you want it to resonate so that you, just like you were talking about, when someone tells you exactly what's wrong with your book, right? You also want someone to tell who likes your book, to tell you what's good about it, and also why it's important and what it's about, and it's kind of an elusive quest, I think.
Yeah, and to throw another wrench in this, I think maybe this quest to sort of figure out what it's about is something of a sort of marketing technique, right? My father was a writer, and he believed if he would say you should read this novel, I would say, what is it about? And he'd say, fiction is not about anything. Fiction is it's something else. It's an experience. It's a moment for this particular character. It's not about anything. Just like your life is not about anything. It just sort of is, and that's very sort of fuzzy edged. But I think this idea of finding out what your book is, what your piece is about, is really something that everybody has to define for themselves. And that this idea of the book jacket, the query letter, and the elevator pitch is the professionalism part of it. That's the marketing part of it.
But stories are driven by so many different engines, and I don't know, there's a book that's on a lot of the best of 2019 books lists that I keep seeing over and over. I have not read it, but what I know about it is it's all one sentence. Has anyone read this?
What is
Yeah.
that? No.
It's called Ducks New Report. Yeah. So I haven't read it. I don't know what it's about, but I know it's one sentence. That's what's important about the book, is that it's all one sentence. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Like,
that's a
it's
good catch.
Wait,
Yeah.
so is it a book sentence?
It's like a fucking 200-page book. I don't know. Sorry, I swore. This is being recorded, but but apparently people say it's good, and I don't have a dog in this fight because I haven't read it, so I don't think it's good or bad. But that's what it doesn't matter what it's about, because that's the thing that's about. That's the thing that people. Maybe your book is about the cool world building, or maybe your book is about the characters, or maybe your book is about the fact that it doesn't use any quotation marks. But I think what it's about is theme. I think that's getting at theme and also plot a little bit, but there are other things that can drive the story besides theme and plot. So
There may be something with memoir too, where I think, because you're writing about yourself and you really have to kind of get over yourself. You're asked a lot where it's okay, what is this going to have for somebody else? You're drawing from your life, and it can be really hard because you want to be well, this is what happened, but that's not the point. It has to really be an emotional truth, and you have to have the arc and the whole thing. But it's your life, so you feel weird. You're what? So
seems extra hard probably to say.
yeah, there's
like,
a
what
weird
is your life
nonfiction,
about?
which I like, because you have to be kind of aware of what you're doing. You can't really just be well, it's whatever.
Can I ask something related to that? You
Yeah.
guys are making me think so much about how you hold your audience in your mind, as you're writing, and maybe after you're writing that comes more to the fore in terms of all of these questions about marketing. But I wonder how much you think about who is going to read your work while you're writing, and is there a face to that person at the beginning, or does it come at the end, or how does it work for each of you as a writer?
I think the traditional advice is don't think about it right in a vacuum and just be an artiste, right? But I think I think a lot about pleasure and what gives me pleasure, because chances are any given project you're working on may never see publication. So what's going to entertain me and what's going to entertain readers like me, think Toni Morrison said, like, write the book that you want to see in the world. So to me, yeah, like what stories haven't been told, or what am I obsessed with that I want to explore, that I think readers like me would want to join me to experience for 300 pages. That's my answer.
Yeah, I think I don't imagine an audience. I think I am sort of the audience, but I'm not me, if that makes any sense.
That does make sense.
And that I think what I'm after is what's true, and that sounds kind of trite, but that the audience I'm after is the sort of truth seeker in what I'm writing, and I am the only arbiter of that while I'm writing.
I feel like that book has a certain voice to it, and I'll probably not really use that voice again. I don't believe like there's just one voice, but it was perfect for that story and that book. And so I felt like when I was writing it, that, you know, that narrator, like I was kind of chasing the voice. I was chasing the narrator, like, because it was a me, not me, right? It was, I might have had like a person in mind vaguely, but it really was about just speaking truly from that voice and from that place in myself, which had a certain kind of orientation to the story, which was a little bit formalized, a little bit sad, a little bit intimate. There's a lot of like addressing the reader. There were different qualities of the voice that I was creating that I really liked, and it just felt right. So it became about, well, keep doing that, you know. But I too don't ever really think of who's reading it, and
Yeah, I think it really depends on what your genre is, and even genre is sort of a dirty word. But you know, I think if you're writing a thriller, you do sort of have an audience in mind, which is right, that they have expectations for what that book is going to be.
which you can manipulate, and that's fun, but you have to know what they're going to expect. Yeah.
Probably just have time for one more question. Is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to ask one?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I really like what you said about having like maybe more than one voice, because I've been routinely told like, oh, you know, you gotta find your voice, and it's like that kind of always confounded me. It's like, well, I write different things in different ways.
There
Like,
you
don't
I know.
and that's now almost been an inhibitor to me in some instances, because like I feel almost confined to write it in a very singular, characteristic way that's iconic of me.
Right.
But it's like, no, I use different cadences and different word flow for depending upon what I want to write.
I think
So that's actually very cathartic that you said that.
But I think voice is also is essentially about observation and sort of aesthetics, and that will change. I mean that will stay the same even if the tone shifts. If that makes sense.
There's probably maybe like over someone's body of work, you could see consistency with style or something, but even though the voice of a book might vary or something,
Very different,
right?
yeah,
But
right.
a certain kind of tendency or way of writing maybe. But I think to me too, it was just very refreshing to know, and especially as a nonfiction writer. I mean, we're all many people, but if I were writing fiction, I get to use a lot of myself in ways, you know, through characters. But if it's just me, I want to be able to use all those different parts, and that's fun.
Absolutely.
This has been really fun. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of you needs to write a book called The Eighth Voice.
Eighth
Voice.
voice.
For sure. This has been incredibly valuable, so thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you.
this. Before
Thanks.
we end here, if you have anything you want to share about how people can find out more about your work, or any other suggestions, practical suggestions for moving forward with this? Last comments?
Don't get discouraged.
Yeah, keep going. That's like
It is the long haul. You know, I have a real sort of pet peeve about writers in movies and on TV. Because, you know, they sit down in their lovely
In their
little
enormous
place.
Manhattan apartment.
Yeah, beautiful Manhattan apartment, all they have is a laptop, they've got no shit around them. And they come up with this perfect thing, and they get a publisher who takes them out to, you know, martini lunches,
Yeah.
and then it's a bestseller. maybe it happens to some people, but I think for.
We haven't met them, we don't
We
talk
haven't
to
But
them.
even if you
We
think
don't wanna meet them.
you're rational, you know it doesn't happen, it's a fantasy. I had it. I think every
Yes,
writer, you
that's
know what I
right,
mean?
it's
And it's
a
embarrassing to
fantasy.
say, but it's like, oh, yeah,
Right.
But, you know, even though I'm like, sane person, but we do in this culture have this myth of the young genius, they just like came out that way, like, or the big bestseller, and they don't say they had 10 novels before that one when they just clicked with an audience. So, it's a lot of work, that is what it comes down to, that's why you really have to love it. You have your groups, you have your support, like this wonderful place that's supporting you in your whole endeavor. It's just amazing.
There are a lot of writers groups and classes and resources outside the club in Providence. Check out Goat Hill Writers. Hester is one of the 3 co-founders of that wonderful organization. They'll have some great classes and opportunities in 2020. Kay, I know, is teaching for Grove Street.
Yeah, my practical suggestion for what you should do
There you
next
go.
is sign up for my class. Novel in Progress.
There you
I'm
go.
not joking, it starts January 15th, and it's not listed, it's through Grove Street, but it'll be here, and I'm gonna actually put an email list if you want me to email you just once to let you know once the registration thing is up, so you can
What
register.
type of class is it?
Say what?
What type of class is it?
It's called the Novel in Progress, and we're gonna be working with folks who have, all of us will have a draft of a novel, but be trying to figure out, like, how do you fit, like, a lot of these questions address that, right? Like, what do I do now? I know my draft's a mess, or I'm not sure if my draft's a mess, or I have 3/4 of the draft, and how should the ending be? We're gonna work on, like, I think a lot of writing workshops focus more on generating the beginning of a project, but this is really for, like, how do you keep momentum and keep working on a novel that you've been working on?
And how do you finish?
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be like a support
When it comes
group.
time to finish, it's always like, slow down, back away.
Great. And I know Hester and Janet have cards on the table
Yes,
as
yeah,
well.
put a card there, I have a
Yeah,
website, it's just my name.
So